Hi there, I'm Ivana and I'm a psychologist living and working in Luxembourg. This season on the Mind Matters podcast, I'm doing something a little special. I am taking on the myths that shape the way we think about happiness, relationships, and success. Each episode, I will dispel a common myth, break down the psychology behind it, and give you practical steps to bring a little more clarity into your daily life. So join me. I want to share a model I will shape each episode with. The biopsychosocial model is a way of understanding human experiences by looking at three interconnected layers: biology, psychology, and social environment. Instead of focusing on just one cause for how we feel or behave, it shows how these layers constantly influence each other. The biological layer covers everything happening in the body and brain, from hormones and neurotransmitters to genetics and sleep patterns. This is the physical foundation that shapes our responses. The psychological layer is about our thoughts, emotions, personality, and coping styles. It includes how we interpret events, our beliefs about ourselves, and the habits that can either help or harm us. The social layer is the world around us. Relationships, culture, community, work, and even the stories our society tells. These factors can either protect us or add stress. What makes the biopsychosocial model powerful is that it works like a three-way conversation. A change in one layer ripples into the others. By understanding all three, we get a fuller picture of why we think, feel, and act the way we do. In every episode, we can use this model to break down a topic from all three angles and give you practical tools that work in real life. All right, so let's start the season with the lone wolf myth. The lone wolf image has been romanticized in countless films, books, and songs. Think of Clint Eastwood's silent drifter in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, moving through the world on his own terms. Or Keanu Reeves' John Wick, driven by personal codes and fueled by solitude. In music, Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run captures that restless urge to break away. Simon & Garfunkel's I Am a Rock tells the story of someone who builds emotional walls to avoid pain. These images often frame the lone wolf as mysterious, self-reliant, and unshakably strong. But beneath the surface, they also hint at isolation, loss, and the cost of disconnecting from others, a reality that makes the image far more complex than it first appears. So let's start with the biology side of the whole lone wolf myth. Basically, when we look at how our brains work, we're kind of wired from the ground up to be social. We've all heard about oxytocin. That's like the famous bonding hormone. But let's get a bit more specific. So this is how it works. When we interact with people we trust, or even just have a friendly chat, our brain releases oxytocin. It's not just a one-time thing. It kind of works like a little rhythm throughout the day. For example, if you have a positive social interaction in the morning, you might get a little boost of oxytocin that actually makes you feel more connected and even a bit calmer as you go on with your day. It's like your brain's way of saying, hey, this social stuff is good for us, let's do more of it. And the interesting thing is that when we do have those social connections, it can actually help regulate things like our cortisol levels, which are our stress hormones. So biologically, we're kind of built to lean on each other, and the whole lone wolf idea, well, it just doesn't quite match how our bodies and brains naturally work. So let's get a little more serious about what's happening in the brain. Oxytocin is produced primarily in the hypothalamus, which is this tiny but super important region deep in your brain. It then gets released by the pituitary gland, and from there it travels through your bloodstream and also acts directly in the brain. What's fascinating is that oxytocin works a bit like a modulator for social behavior. It influences areas of the brain linked to trust, bonding, and even how we interpret social cues. So when you think about it, oxytocin is like this behind-the-scenes player that makes social interactions feel rewarding. It can even help lower our defenses a little bit and make us more open to connecting with others. And that's why, from a neuroscience perspective, the idea of being totally self-sufficient and never needing social bonds really doesn't line up with how our brains are actually built to function. All right, so let's shift gears and talk about the psychology of the lone wolf myth. Now, psychologically, oxytocin doesn't just influence our biology, it also shapes how we feel and how we think about relationships and independence. So, psychologically speaking, one of the big reasons the lone wolf myth is so appealing is that it taps into this idea of self-sufficiency and strength. We often think, hey, if I can do everything on my own, that means I'm strong and independent. But what psychology tells us is that real emotional resilience often comes from having a support network. Oxytocin plays a role here because it actually helps us feel safe and connected when we're with people we trust. It kind of nudges us to value those connections because they make us feel more emotionally balanced and supported. So when we buy into the myth of having to do everything alone, we're kind of working against our own psychological wiring. Psychologically, having people around us, friends, family, or a community, helps us process stress, boosts our mood, and even makes us more resilient when life throws curveballs. So, in a nutshell, the psychology here is that while the lone wolf myth might sound appealing, embracing our need for connection is actually what makes us stronger and more balanced in the long run. So let's bring this home with a couple of examples. Imagine you've had one of those days where you're dealing with a lot on your own. You might think, okay, I've got this. I don't need anyone's help. And sure, you can handle it. But let's say a friend calls you up for a quick chat, or you grab a coffee with someone you trust. During that conversation, you might feel this subtle shift, like a little more at ease, a little less weighed down. That's oxytocin doing its quiet work in the background, helping you feel connected and supported. And that little boost can make a big difference in how you handle everything else. Or think about it this way, maybe you're someone who's always prided yourself on being independent, and that's great. But when you open up to a friend about something you're going through, you might notice you feel a bit lighter afterward. It's not just emotional. That's your brain chemistry working exactly the way it's meant to. So when we talk about the psychology of the matter, it's about realizing that these little moments of connection aren't just nice extras. They're actually part of how we stay balanced and resilient. So yeah, we can be strong and independent, but letting people in, that's a psychological strength too. So let's look at it from a social perspective with something a bit more concrete. Think about a character you've seen in a movie, maybe the classic lone hero who seems to do everything solo. But then there's that turning point in the story where they have to rely on a team. And suddenly you see how much stronger they become because they're not doing it all alone. It's a pattern we see over and over. The lone wolf turns out to be more powerful when they have a pack. Or think about an influencer who's super successful and seems like they've built their platform on their own. If you look closer, they often have a whole community behind them. People who support, collaborate, and to share their work. And that's really the social truth here. Even the most independent-looking successes are often built on a network of relationships. So when we break down the lone wolf myth on a social level, it's about recognizing those real-life stories. no one's really an island. And once we embrace that, we see that connection is a strength, not a weakness. We've talked about the lone wolf myth from all these different angles, and now I want to take a little detour before we jump into the practical tools. Sometimes the best advice I can give is that it's not always about just doing everything yourself. Sometimes it's about knowing when to reach out for a little extra support and figuring out what kind of help fits best. Let's start with the idea that sometimes you just need a friend. If you're feeling a bit off or you're stuck in that lone wolf mindset and you just need to talk things out, a good friend can be a perfect first step. Friends are great for those moments when you just need someone to listen, share a laugh, or give you that you're not alone feeling. They might not have all the answers, but they can remind you that it's okay to lean on someone you trust. Now, if you're finding that you need more than just a friendly ear, maybe you're dealing with some deeper stuff, feeling stuck in patterns that you can't quite break on your own, or you just want some professional guidance, then it might be time to think about a counselor or a therapist. A counselor is often a great fit if you need some structured support with specific issues, like managing stress, navigating life changes, or improving communication skills. They can give you practical tools and a supportive space to figure things out. And then there's the option of a therapist, especially if you're working through deeper emotional patterns, past experiences, or mental health concerns that need a bit more exploration. A therapist can help you unpack those layers, using evidence-based approaches to help you understand yourself better and build healthier ways of connecting. So the surprising angle here is that sometimes the best step toward feeling less like a lone wolf is to recognize when it is time to get a little help. It doesn't mean you're not strong or independent. It just means you're smart enough to know that sometimes we all need a guide. So that's our little detour, knowing when to lean on a friend, when to find a counselor, and when to reach out to a therapist. So here are 3 practical questions you can ask yourself as a kind of mini test to see where you're at with feeling like a lone wolf and what kind of support you might need. First question. When you're feeling isolated, do you find that a simple chat with a friend or family member usually helps lift your mood? If the answer is yes, you might be at level 1, where a little social nudge from someone you trust is enough to get you feeling reconnected. Second question. Do you often feel like you need more consistent or structured strategies to help break out of your isolation? Maybe something a bit more than just a one-time conversation? If that's you, you're probably at level 2, where adding in some structured self-help tools or routines can make a real difference. Third question, are you noticing that despite your best efforts, the feelings of loneliness or disconnection are really lingering and affecting your day-to-day life? If that's the case, then you're likely at level 3, and it might be the right time to reach out to a therapist or counselor who can give you that personalized support. So by answering those 3 questions, you can kind of pinpoint where you are and figure out which level of support makes the most sense for you right now. And here's really something thought-provoking. The idea that younger generations, despite being constantly connected through their phones and social media, are often reporting the highest levels of loneliness. Meanwhile, older generations, like boomers, who might not be as digitally plugged in, often don't identify themselves as lonely in the same way. It's a really intriguing contrast that makes us rethink what loneliness actually means. From an anthropological perspective, loneliness isn't just about being physically alone. It's about feeling disconnected in a world where connection is often measured by the number of online interactions rather than deep meaningful relationships. For younger people, the paradox is that they're surrounded by digital friends and constant notifications, but that doesn't necessarily translate to feeling truly seen or understood. On the flip side, many older adults might have fewer online connections, but they often rely on long-established in-person relationships or community ties, which can offer a different kind of resilience against loneliness. At the end of the day, a big part of feeling less like a lone wolf is about producing that real oxytocin in your brain. And that doesn't come from just another notification or a quick chat online. It comes from those meaningful in-person connections or deeper interactions that really make you feel seen and understood. So in a way, we're circling back to that biological piece. If you want to feel less lonely, you need to find ways to spark that oxytocin through genuine, real-world social bonds. So to support all of this, there's actually some recent university research that lines up perfectly. For instance, a 2024 study from the University of Cambridge in collaboration with Fudan University found that social isolation and loneliness are linked to certain proteins related to inflammation, and that these biological markers can impact overall health. What's interesting is that the study also highlighted the role of oxytocin in mitigating some of these effects. In other words, genuine social connections that help produce oxytocin can actually counter some of the negative impacts of loneliness on the body. So if we're talking about boosting oxytocin in some maybe surprising ways, there's actually some cool science out there. For instance, certain foods that are rich in vitamin D, magnesium, and even probiotics can play a role in overall mood and indirectly support oxytocin pathways. For example, there's evidence that foods like fatty fish, which are high in vitamin D, or fermented foods like yogurt or kimchi, which support gut health, can help create a biochemical environment that's more favorable for oxytocin release. Another kind of fun fact, gentle, warm touch or even petting an animal can significantly boost oxytocin levels, which has been shown in studies from places like the University of Missouri. It's kind of a nice reminder that sometimes the simplest, most natural actions have a pretty profound biochemical impact. All right, so let's make this episode actually useful. I've put together what I'm calling the Lone Wolf Reset Toolkit. Think of it as a menu. You just pick one thing from each section this week. No pressure, no homework vibe, just try it out and see what happens. First up, micro connection moves. These are tiny, almost effortless actions that still pack a punch. Give one genuine compliment to someone you see today. Yes, even the barista or your coworker. Send a thinking of you message to a friend without following it up with, by the way, can you do such and such? And here's my favorite. Make eye contact and smile at someone you usually just walk past. That's it. Next, connection habits that stick. Start a low-pressure ritual like a weekly coffee with a friend, or even a 10-minute online game with someone. And here's the 2-minute rule. If replying to a message or saying yes to a quick invite will take less than 2 minutes, just do it right then. Quick oxytocin boosters. Pet an animal seriously. It is virtual magic for oxytocin boost. Or give someone a warm hug, or go for a short walk with a friend. Bonus points if it's outside in bright daylight. Watch your favorite lone hero movie and write down every single time they actually rely on someone else. Or take something you usually do alone, like grocery shopping, a workout, or even watching a show, and invite someone to join. And that's it for today's episode of Mind Matters. If you try even one of those Lone Wolf Reset ideas this week, I promise you'll start noticing the ripple effect in ways you might not expect. Remember, you don't have to overhaul your life. Small intentional shifts can change how connected and supported you feel. I'll be back soon with more episodes that dig into the psychology behind the things we all experience, and more importantly, give you actionable tools you can actually use in your day-to-day life. So until next time, take care of your mind, take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next episode. I will link all the studies and references in the show's description. If you found this discussion insightful, please consider sharing it with friends, family, or colleagues. Let's keep the conversation going about how we can make this affluent corner of Europe a healthier, more equitable place for everyone. Until next time, remember, your mind matters, and taking care of it is the best investment you'll ever make.